Hello and welcome to the etbrandequity.com Social Media Trends Summit presented by Talkwalker. The art of being socially relevant is what drives the audience to your brand. Identifying a suitable platform to portray your content, product, and keeping up with the demands of the consumer makes that process seem more effortless. Social media platforms has also revised their content offerings as well as a strategy to help brands and agencies reach out to their set of target audience. Their motive is to sustain the right balance between the latest trends and standard marketing approaches to deliver unique experiences to audience through personalization. To bind this process together, understanding the pattern shift of consumers and keeping updated with the latest technologies on new media becomes a key to success. It is all about serving the customer right and to go beyond to enrich their experience. The aim of the summit is to bring together the stakeholders from the industry on the same platform to discuss this very topic. Now, without much ado, I would like to invite Mr. Ajit Mohan, Vice President and Managing Director, India, Facebook, and Mr. Rana Barua, Group CEO, India, Havas Group, for a keynote fireside chat on the topic, Where Your Audience Resides, Crafting Impactful Engagements.
Welcome to a new session today. My name is Rana Barua, and I am the Group CEO of Havas Group, a leading advertising and media group company in India. And it's my pleasure to have a very special guest and an extremely close colleague of mine, Mr. Ajit Mohan, who is the Vice President and Managing Director of Facebook India. Welcome, Ajit, to this very, very interesting session and the next half an hour that you will be spending with me.
Thank you, Rana. Great to be here.
Okay, so I think, without much ado, if we can kick off this session and just to make it a bit of a kind of a background on what we will be discussing. Of course, coming from where you are, I don't think we need to describe what we will be talking today. But I think, something that we are seeing very closely from the media landscape and the overall advertising landscape and across all our group companies that we are seeing with the clients, that there's been a lot of change that's happening in the social media, whether, we see the kind of stuff that's happening because of pandemic. And I'm sure there are many such questions you've been answering. But what we are witnessing is a great change in the kind of media consumptions, the kind of streaming, the kind of choices of viewing that's going on across all forms of social media. So in the context of today, what do you see is a kind of a change that you feel that a lot of us should be aware of? And where do you see is the change that Facebook is naturally taking this on head on because there is a genuine change? So over to you, Ajit, with the question one.
Sure, Rana. And I do think, Rana, all of this is framed by how marketing has evolved over the last few years. And especially if I look at it in the Indian context, obviously influenced by a lot what is happening around the world, but in the last 5 years. And I do think if you fundamentally look at marketing as inspiring people to follow your brand, to have interest, to passion around a product or service that you're pitching to consumers, and finally making it easier for them to embrace your product or service, including purchase. The way in which marketing happens and how compelling it is has changed a lot. And I know the context of today's conversation is about social media, but I do wonder whether some of those labels, whether they're valid anymore. I do see people still thinking about marketing as digital marketing, social media marketing. My sense is it's time for us to think about there is marketing, which is the way to do it in terms of the world that we are living in now. And then there is analog marketing that still embraces a way of marketing that is derived from learnings and playbooks that are sometimes decades old and doesn't reflect the world that we are in today. And in that context, I think a few things to call out. One, of course, and I'm sure Rana will kind of dig into this over the next 20, 25 minutes. One, of course, is the extent to which digital is playing a role in people's lives. And now it's almost a cliche, but it's factually true that what was anyway a fundamental shift that was happening in terms of people spending more time online, as well as people buying things online, has gotten accelerated in the last 6 to 9 months, because the whole world, not just India, had this forced sampling of a very different way of life because of the pandemic. And while it has created a lot of disruption, clearly it's created a lot of disruption in our lives, and uh, people, losing lives around the world, which is not great. It's also starting to drive fundamental shifts in people's lives. People were already starting to spend a lot of time on digital screens. I think what the last 6 months has accelerated is the trend of, in a marketing context, discovering products and services online, and then a dramatic increase in comfort in terms of buying things online. Uh, just to give you a bit of a context, Rana, we did some work with BCG in India, and one of the data points that stood out for me is that 90% of people who bought apparel online, including many who were new to the category for the first time, said they intend to continue the habit. So this is not just a temporary shift. The forced sampling essentially has created a permanent shift in behavior. So I think that's one thing to call out. I think the second thing to call out is um, the emergence of all kinds of new formats of expression and communication, and introducing new things to people. I think in marketing terms, we can call it as building a brand or helping discovery, but fundamentally, it is in this new world, in terms of how people live their lives, in terms of how people engage with others, a large proportion of which is happening online. It's creating all kinds of new formats. And I don't want to put boundaries around it, right? It could be the emergence of short form video. It could be the introduction of AR and VR. I think we're seeing that people are very naturally including AR effects into their communication and expression. It could be the role of influencers, right? Trusted people who a large number of people in the country and around the world are looking to for defining culture, for defining trends. And what does that mean as a platform for discovery? So that's sort of the second thing in my mind, that um, uh, it is no longer just about companies putting together 30-second and 60-second videos playing out on very large screens is not the only way, and increasingly probably not the majority way in which people around the world are being introduced to new things. And the third one is, I guess, the mechanistics of marketing itself, where you know there's a line that I think both of us are familiar with, has been around for a long time, that uh, we know that marketing is extremely powerful, and we know that 50% of marketing is effective, but we've always struggled with knowing which 50% of the marketing spend is effective. I just don't think that world is true anymore. And I think one of the things that has dramatically changed is a lot of marketing is now very clear, very attributable, and you know exactly what you get from the money that you've spent. And of course, I think Facebook as a company, and across Facebook and Instagram as marketing platforms, has delivered huge value in driving that shift. And I do think in many ways, when I listen to some of the conversations around measurement or viewability, I do think the marketing community has not fully caught up with the reality of the empowerment that has come, where every marketing dollar is today accountable, attributable, and measurable. So for me, Rana, that's kind of the three big things, right? The shift from offline to online, which is very clear, the explosion of new formats and expression, and third, for the marketing community, where I think it's pretty clear that the new generation of marketers are very clear that they want to show accountability for their work and their spend. I think there's still a lag in recognizing that that world now exists, and it's time to discard our focus on input metrics, right? It's not about are people viewing something and for how long. It's about what exactly are you getting from the money that you're spending on marketing. And I do want to say, Rana, all of this is framed by something uniquely true in India, which is that in the last 5 years, frankly, in the last 4 years, um, 500 million people have come online in India with access to affordable, high quality mobile broadband. I think because it has happened so fast, because no country has seen that kind of a transformation in this short a period of time, I'm not sure whether the world at large has recognized the power of what that's been built. 500 million people online who are communicating with each other, who can buy things, who can discover things. That's a fundamental shift. And I think we've done the hard work of, well, frankly, the telcos. I think with Geo sort of initiating the positive disruption, have done all the hard work in making this happen. But with that as a foundation, with platforms like us providing that enabling layer, it's now for the other side, right? And in classic economic terms, it's now for the supply side to figure out how do they light up this 500, 550, 600 million people in a way that accelerates not just the recovery of businesses, but fundamentally building new models that can fuel growth for the next few years.
Yeah, no, I think, Ajit, thanks. I think, this just an initial question about just the medium and just what you just shared is fantastic, because I think what in a very holistic way and with certain examples, you actually set the entire conversation set to say that what are the changes. And in fact, you actually helped me answer a lot of other questions that I had because it gives a complete macro and in certain cases also how the directionally what we are doing. So it's fantastic, So what I will do is I'm going to change my next question because I think you've taken care of the consumer behavior shifts. But I think one of the challenges, and this is something more from the experience that we are seeing across us as a group which handles multiple companies, and I'm sure for all advertising and media companies, is that like you gave us a number of 500,000, and you're saying there are lots of people who are using this medium, and you're right. We are seeing that changes across most of
500 million, Rana.
sorry 500 million.
500, 600 million.
Yeah, 500, 600 million. I think one of the big challenges that whenever we meet and we discuss with all our clients is, when you look at the consumer shift, are you seeing a demographic stroke, even a psychographic profile, which we used to classify since we are discussing some of the old classifications? Let's see if we still hold on to one or two of those. Is that, do you see a big shift in terms of mediums, or are you seeing an even? Are you seeing, we have this very natural habit of saying, okay, let's look at the youth of today. Let's go to, as you said, the world of digital and social media, which actually is not true. We know it. How do you all see it? Because my next question in that is that then how do you see businesses and what opportunities do you see with businesses and clients as a result of these changes? So demographics, psychographics, and businesses, because what we experience, Ajit, is a lot of businesses are still formatting in a classical way. And then they go and say that, okay, let's look at the digital world for some of these activities. Whereas that is not true, which is, we all know that, because the world is much flatter.
I think, Rana, it'll be a monumental mistake for the creative and marketing community to think of digital as a nice icing on the cake. I think that was it was okay to do it 10 years ago. I think you may have been able to get away with it 5 years ago. I just don't think it is remotely an option anymore, Rana. I genuinely think, and I say this as a framing because, and I think, being a creative and a marketing friendly person, Rana, you will understand the power of symbol framing. I do think it may be good for all of us now to think about, if you do want to bifurcate marketing, it is not marketing and digital marketing, it is marketing and analog marketing.
Right.
Because I do think it is important to now recognize what is mainstream and what may be, and I don't mean to be provocative, and niche I think is a bit unfair, but what is definitely not mainstream. Um, and then I think, to your question, I do think, Rana, there are two or three things to it. One, there is no getting away from uh, what is fundamentally a big positive thing, that India is a young country,
Yeah.
and we will continue to be on the demographic curve, get younger before the aging starts, right? So that is the macro part of it, is that whenever you are speaking to India as a whole, you are speaking to, in a global context, a very young population with everything positive that comes from it, including desire to create positive outcomes for the life ahead of you, right? What we tend to kind of classify as the aspirational class. It is true. And I've now seen that over the last few years in multiple categories, right? I think there is power in recognizing the aspirational nature of a very young population. And rightly so, because look at how the country has changed in the last 20, 25 years, that that momentum towards being aspirational is reinforced by the change that people have seen in their own lives. Um, the other part of it is, and I think, which is what you were getting to, is I think it no longer is a luxury to say, let's speak to youth, right? Some ways, kind of assume that there is a youth and we need to talk to them in a different way. I think that is cliched, right? I'm not sure whether that holds true. And I've also seen in the last few years, and where brands that supposedly are catering to the youth sometimes express the way the old people think the youth should be talked to. So I think that probably is no longer true. Probably it was never true. But then there is the third part, Rana, which I assume that is true for all of us in our lives, is in terms of embracing technology, in terms of embracing new formats of expression, or even new ways of discovering products. Yeah, I think the age-old curve of there are early adopters and there are followers tends to be true. There seems to be some universality to that across generations and countries and products. And that would be true here as well. That you are likely to see some element of a distribution curve where people are embracing formats faster than others, and maybe age is a big criteria. But to where I started, when you have 600 million people online, and all of those people are leading a life with the mobile screen at the heart of it, probably starting to be large screen broadband homes in a bit, gaming devices over the next few years. The life that they're leading is not the life that they were leading even 4 years ago. And that is true for my 85-year-old dad, and it's true for my 6-year-old son, right? But and frankly, I mean, I'm surprised at the speed with which my dad embraced the internet, going back to the mid 90s. But even the extent to which the mobile plays a role in his life today is different from 4 years ago. So I think the shift is across the board, but I think it's important to understand all the nuances of what it means, that it's a young country, that there will always be a distribution in embracing new technology. And just as an anecdotal story, and uh, uh, I'm pretty sure we are seeing this in our lives. I'm seeing a big difference between my 6.5-year-old son's behavior and my 18-month-old baby's behavior, right? I'm seeing a comfort with the the second kid in terms of the mobile. Now, one way to look at it is this is all irresponsible parenting from my side in terms of exposure to screen. But at least in the context of today's discussion,
Yes, it's fine.
it just shows the ease with which people are embracing new formats. He assumes certain things of a screen in front of him. I see him, scroll, forget even touch. For my older son, the idea of touching a screen, I was kind of like, wow, he's assuming it. For the second one, the touching is now given. It's sort of he's scrolling, he's moving in up and down, and I'm seeing him choose videos almost on his own, which is unthinkable. So I do think as a creative community, it's important to recognize all of it, while at the same time, hopefully, staying away from old people's stereotypes of what young people like.
Yeah. No, I think this excellent. I think just relating to your conversation and seeing the kind of conversations that you see, and you're right. It's all anecdotal, but that's the truth. When I see my unit here, and I see the two boys again, two different generations, and the way they have, whether it's, I don't think it's about irresponsible parenting, Ajit, because I think this is like you started by saying, if this is the world and this is where India is, it is bound to happen. Now, that's a separate forum, separate conversation about what we need to do. But I think today we will naturally make it sound far more positive and exciting, which brings me to another very interesting question, which is from my group, which is about a meaningful brand study. It's a proprietary tool that we do across the world. And we just recently did an India COVID case study, just trying to figure out what's the mood, what's the sentiment, how are people behaving, what are they saying. It's not like a very large sample, but it was just to figure out how we are talking. And what came out very clearly that the consumers really want the highest standards of safety and hygiene from most of the brands. Of course, that is understandable. Now, in this kind of a scenario, a lot of conversations are happening today about meaningful brands, which is something that we have a proprietary tool, and brands with purpose. I'm sure you're coming across this every now and then. And my question to you is that, because it is one of the highest influencers, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, you are your culture. It's not your part of culture. It is culture. It's probably, when we define culture many years down the line, it will become one of those words that, this is our culture. How do you all, what is the advice to a lot of these brands from your point of view about how to define meaningful purpose coming from such a strong cultural context? And even if I may use the word, that there is a big cultural influence on the youth that's happening through most of the conversations that your brands are having. So how do you define meaningful or purpose, or do you all actually let it happen from the consumer's point of view?
Great question, Rana. And I would say this in a couple of ways, right? One, I don't think as a company, we don't see ourselves as knowing enough or uh, having that wisdom to tell others, sort of how to do brand building or think of building purposeful brands. In many ways, I think as a company, we benefit from the wisdom of so many companies who have built such meaningful, compelling, purposeful brands over the last few generations, right? I think we feel inspired by many of them. So I wouldn't dare to kind of give advice. Uh, I think I can give you an example of our own sort of, when I think about largely most of our conversations are about other products and categories and brands leveraging the scale and the extent to which Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp are immersed in the social fabric of the world, frankly. So a lot of the conversation becomes about how other brands leverage us as a marketing platform. But let me give an example of how we think about telling our own story. And I think Facebook app is a good example.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why um, we have been more uh, vocal and articulating our story a lot more in the last couple of years than we ever have done in the 13 years before that is we thought we needed to tell our story. That in the absence of us telling the story, there was a vacuum that was being filled by other voices, um, and when we are telling our story, it was very easy for us to quickly come to the point of saying, look, what is at the core of what we do is the mission that we all believe in. And fundamentally on Facebook, it's really about how can we really give the world the tools, the enablers, the platforms to help others build community. How can we give people the power to build things that they believe in? Uh, and in some ways, if you have seen the Facebook app communication recently around more together, that comes from that belief in that purpose and mission, which is we fundamentally believe that the world is better off when we come together, when we do more things together, than when we do things at cross purposes or when we do things solo. And that kind of inspired more together. And it's a communication that is live now on IPL.
Yeah.
And I believe that line from the mission and the purpose to then the articulation and the communication is the one that's working for us.
Yeah. No, no,
And therefore, I mean, and I think there are, I think there's enough body of work around thinking about purpose around companies and brands. But clearly, we do work in a mission-oriented company here, and I think it comes across in the communication that we do when we talk about our own platforms.
yeah. No, in fact, you're right, because I just saw the work. In fact, this morning it's come out in one of the portals, and I was going through the work. Very interesting, because one of the questions that I had, while I know it clearly states that we are not a marketplace, which is Facebook, right? And I was reading through the conversation to understand, but I think somewhere it is also standing very interestingly for a lot of the, while these are individual specific, but I also, as a person, as a recipient, and as a marketer and a communication person, also see that you are trying to help the businesses to come out and say that we are here to help. Is that a genuine attempt to also help the small businesses who've been hit across the country, as we know? Means, is there a way Facebook can actually help them in this journey and work? Because I think some of the conversations are not directly speaking that language, but you are saying that you can be part of my journey and I'm here to help. So it's a bit of a thin line.
150%. And it's a great observation, Rana. The only thing I would kind of double up is we are being very overt
Okay.
about communicating that one of our missions is to help businesses build successful businesses. That's kind of expanding opportunity is a part of our mission. I think you asked about small business, and I think it's important to kind of double click on that. And a couple of things, Rana. One, of course, is it's the beginning of our conversation, right? I think because of the marketing platform that we have built around Facebook and Instagram today, uh, businesses around the world, including large businesses, um, understand the power of using a platform where there is not just that you can reach people quickly around the world. The scale of it is obviously a big part of the proposition, but a lot of it is that you have accountability for the marketing spend on the platform. The reason why we have managed to grow as a company is because uh, I think we have added value to businesses where they know that every incremental dollar that they spend on Facebook or Instagram comes with very clear return,
Yeah.
often several times over the money that they're spending. I think that's the power of the platform that has been built. And that obviously adds a lot of value to big businesses. But there is particularly a reason why only 16% of our revenue, and this is the number from Q2, the last quarter of 2020, only 16% of our revenue comes from the top 100 advertisers in the world,
Yeah.
right? So that kind of means, and we have always recognized that the companies who leverage us, that we rely on, and they rely on us, uh, are the very long list of small businesses around the world.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. I think, and let me outline. There are a few reasons for that. One, the philosophy has been that we should give small businesses the same tools that the largest advertiser on the platform has today. Parity, right? Because you're a large advertiser, you don't get access to better tools. Our smallest advertiser has access to that same set of that same toolkit. Um, the second is what we just talked about. Small businesses, by definition, tend to be very frugal. They tend to be very limited in access to resources, right? Especially in the early stages of building their businesses. And because we have built a platform where the accountability for the marketing spend is very high, the most frugal money tends to come here.
Yeah.
And the third one, I think, is just that I think the nature of the platforms that we are,
Yeah.
the role that discovery and new formats of expression play, I think we can enable entirely new business models. I think a great example is White Hat Junior,
Yeah.
an Indian edtech company, and I think you would know Karan, a
Yeah.
spectacular
Yeah.
story of success. But
Fantastic.
a great company built in 15 months. I think zero to I think it was 300 million in value in slightly over a year.
Yeah.
And Karan would say this: in the beginning, a lot of it was only on Facebook and Instagram. And the power of it was recognizing that there was a way to connect the dots, not just in India, but in accessing a global market. And for me, that's a point of personal passion, Rana. That if we as a company, Facebook as a company in India, can fundamentally fuel the growth of small businesses that can aid economic recovery in India in the short term, but build great business models in the future, including business models that are catering for the world at large. And I think we have the opportunity to do because of the platform that we are. That's something that we want to deliver. And that's the reason why you're seeing us overtly communicate that as well.
Excellent. I think that's really, really heartening, because I think that's the kind of support we need. Ajit, just two quick questions, because we'll probably be running out of time. One is keeping this whole framework in mind, and naturally, it's not, we don't need to deep dive, but naturally for you, safety is also one of the prime concerns that we keep discussing for all our clients and all our advertisers, and especially with so many new, let's say, new advertisers, if I may use the term, people who are like not the top 100 who are familiar with the medium and all. So is that something that genuinely that keeps working? And I know you all are working, and we know that because we work so closely with all of you in that. But that's naturally something as a challenge at the same time is something that you all keep working. How's that going on for you? Is that like, for so many new advertisers coming on board, how do you all, define the safety protocol again for everyone? So that's
Binary answer to your question is absolutely yes. We care about it. We care about it deeply. I think for a company that has more than 3.1 billion people who use our platforms every month, what we've always seen is that the vast number of people on our platform, vast number, are using it for good, are using it to connect to families or building businesses. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we have a framework for safety and security for protecting the people on the platform and advertisers on the platform from, even though it may be a minority of people who may kind of engage in behavior or content that is harmful. And I think what we have done over the last 3 years, Rana, is deeply leaned in to invest, whether it's the 30,000 people who work in safety and security, in the enormous investment made around automation, in building community standards, as well as standards around advertising. The reality is that there is no stakeholder that benefits um, from us not engaging and focusing on this 100%, right? And even from a narrow lens of revenue, which is not the lens that we carry, but even if you carry only the lens of revenue,
yeah.
It is in our self-interest to make sure that we are over-investing in safety, and that's what we have done.
Thank you. I think that's something that we keep discussing, and it's good that everybody's listening to it. There's so many people, and just one last question before we wrap up this fantastic session. I know there's so much to know and talk, but from your personal point of view and the journey that you've had, and actually you've seen some of the biggest companies, and also where do you see Facebook in the next few years, especially in India? We understand that the potential is huge. We have, some of us are part of this entire gravy chain. We are enjoying it because we've seen if I may use the analog world, we are now seeing the change of this new world and all. Where are you seeing this new world of social media, and how do you see Facebook going forward in the next few years? Of course, you are going to grow bigger and better. Anything in your mind that you would like to just leave us behind with, just some of the thoughts that you have as
Yeah,
planned?
to our discussion, Rana, I'm sure there will be a lot of evolution in behaviors. There will be new products and innovation and new formats, uh, many from us, many from other companies. My aspiration and my company's aspiration for India is that we are able to play a constructive role and in really being an ally for India in exploiting this moment of opportunity, right? Where uh, we have this amazing opportunity to use digital to transform our economy, our way of living, and essentially light up opportunity for businesses and people around the country. And for me, that's where we're going to be singularly focused. And to the extent 3 years or 5 years from now, we can look back and say we played a positive, constructive role in fueling that transformation. I think we will see that as a success.
Perfect. Thank you. And I, take this opportunity to thank you for your time, Ajit. I think more power to you and to Facebook for, helping this entire world through the smaller businesses, connecting the world. Like we started this conversation, apart from this huge opportunity, I think what, that the positive aspect of social media and the kind of wonderful, magical stuff that we see, whether like you mentioned, your 85-year-old or to the 6-month-old, 18-month-old, sorry, this world is naturally a far different world. So thanks for your time. Thanks for this wonderful session and all
Thank
the
you,
best
Rana.
for everything. Thanks, Ajit.
Thank you, gentlemen, for putting everything into perspective and sharing detailed information. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to see your engagement on social media as well. So keep tweeting using the hashtag social media trends 2021. Now we would like to call upon Benjamin Soubies, who heads Talkwalker in APAC, to introduce us to the report that his team at Talkwalker have worked on. The report that highlights the top trends for 2021 that every marketer should have a look at before planning their marketing and communication strategy for the following year. This report contains the top 10 social media trends that will shape communications and social media next year, but also input from industry experts from all around the world. Over to you, Mr. Benjamin.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ben, and I manage Talkwalker's presence here in Asia Pacific. I'm actually located in Singapore. I'm here today to talk to you about the social media trends for 2021. So foresight is an incredible thing, all right? And working in conversational intelligence, it's something Talkwalker arms their clients with every day. And so for years now, we've been teaming up with global experts, with industry professionals to predict the trends of the coming year. Well, of course, 2020 was a year no one could have predicted. The pandemic, the economic downturn, the borders closing, working from home, and the general big society changes that we've seen. And so we can definitely say the world is changing faster than ever. How we work, how we consume, how we interact, has potentially and possibly changed forever, right? And so 2021, this is why we think that 2021 might be the most challenging year brands ever have faced. And so why do I say this? Well, it will be the year of the customer, right? And I know what you're probably thinking. Every year is the year of the customer. But in 2021, we will all have to up our game significantly. And why? Well, people are scared, right? The hope for a speedy return to a normal has died recently. And in the midst of it all, we as brands and marketers, have to convince customers that safety is our top priority. And we need to do that while still ensuring the best possible customer experience, right? And so with that, communication is key. And so at this moment in time, let's be realistic. The most accessible channel for this is social media. So let's go in and let's take a look at the most impactful ways to communicate with consumers in 2021. So first, we'll talk about social consciousness. And this is the #1 trend as defined by our survey. So in 2020, it was really clear how this socially conscious generation and in the future generation Alpha had an impact on brands, had an impact on politics, but generally society as a whole, right? And so what we see is that audiences today are more socially aware than ever before. So this is largely a good thing, and brands can exploit this opportunity by, for example, supporting causes that their audiences feel strongly about or care about. So companies will have to engage more with topics like mental health, inclusivity, social justice, for example, or face becoming irrelevant and even potentially obsolete in 2021. So we know that taking a stand has always been admirable, but now it's more so than it has ever been. And not just from the bottom line, right? It's authenticity builds two things. It builds trust and it builds credibility. And both of which are values that are in incredibly high demand at the moment. And we expect this to grow. So we'll see brands, will slowly start to reposition themselves dramatically over the coming month, and moving away from marketing methodology to something that is more cause-driven messaging, if you want. Socially conscious marketing isn't a quick trick, right? It's not a quick fix. It's not something you can do and invent in one day. And it's important to mention that because brands that will act superficially will clearly flounder when called out by consumers, right? Whereas the brands that do it in an authentic way and engage with the issues that matter will thrive because the younger generation increase their spending power. Next, if we look at generally conversation, and by that I mean that conversation between brands and consumers, and we expect this to be really a two-way street. Marketing is a two-way street, we know that, but brands can no longer shut their messages into the void and be like hoping for the best, right? Instead, it's all about conversations. It's about connection. Having conversation with consumers to build those relationships and then create sales. So marketing has always been about telling the right stories and telling it to the right audience and at the right time. But no, it's way more than that. It's about telling the right stories to the right audience, but having them respond. And this is what's key. And especially when the only means of communication is via the internet. And I mean that because, for example, billboards, TV commercial, where real-time reactions cannot really be tracked, aren't that feasible anymore. So all campaigns should absolutely be optimized for building relationships. And why? It's because during this time, relationships can be the only viable sales strategy. So in 2021, we also expect brands and platform to engage in more AI-led opportunities. And this is to connect more with more customers and consumers. So promotions, for example, will become less forced and derive more from natural conversations and establish relationship with consumers. Another point that we want to highlight is, and another trend is the 4 C's of COVID content, right? So 2020, so all of us talk a lot about COVID all the time. And this will clearly continue into next year. Right? But there is a way to go about it and to try and soften the blow. So brands will need to adapt their communication with this in mind, right? And the tone of 2021 will be shaped by the 4 C's of coronavirus content. And so the 4 C's are community, contactless, cleanliness, and also compassion, right? And so these four C's will definitely shape brand communication over the coming year. And they will adapt as the key consumer concerns, our concerns, will change. And we'll see brand connect more with their consumers, analyzing more their conversation to really understand the root and the details of those concerns. But that will enable brands to then tackle these issues more effectively. This means that communication strategies should be defined around the customer experience in relation to COVID. In a way, reassurance is key, and your customers will clearly thank you for it. Something else that we want to mention, coming from our report is digital, is around digital, right? And digital is the name of the game. So we all know digital is no longer an option. It's no longer a concept, right? It's been at the forefront for many years now. We've seen companies well engaged into it, and some companies, that had to be a bit more forced into it recently. But it was there, for a long time. And this is actually quite fortunate for us, because adapting to COVID was not an impossible task for the workforce. But when speaking about digital, we're speaking of digital, we must really talk more than just digital transformation. And what I mean by that is that digital is about data. Digital is about tracking. And arming your team with the correct insights opens up a whole new avenue of opportunity that they can then use to make 2021 a successful year. For example, shoots or travel, even though somewhat resumed here and there, will still be a far cry for next year. And so producing content online and focusing on the various channels of distribution could make or break your 2021. Now, the final trend that we want to highlight is around memes, right? We've all seen so many of them, appearing over the last weeks and months. And so making 2021 a success for your communications team means speaking the language of younger generation. We all know that. But that means now becoming skilled in the arts of communicating with memes. So gone are the days with GIFs rule the internet. Memes are the new big thing, right? And for example, they can be used to normalize extreme behavior. For instance, external agencies interfering with elections or other major events. And while it's impossible to predict the next meme, they're sure to appear across social media in the coming years, and most likely even filter their way into mainstream media. So as they arise, we should expect to see an increase in monitoring the format for brands, but also to minimize the propaganda potential of the medium itself. So we may even see new regulation, for example, appearing as platforms attempt to mitigate the risk of challenging memes. So in 2021, you need to be ready to protect your brand from memes, but also join in the fun. So these are just some of the trends that could govern social media next year. But if you want to know more, and if you want to go for a more in-depth look at the trends for 2021, you can download our entire report that is complete with opinions from industry experts, extensive coverage and example of each of the trends, and much, much more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Benjamin, for the highlights of the insightful report. Stay connected and keep tweeting using the hashtag Social Media Trends 2021. With this, we'll move on to the next session. Today, social media is no more confined to connecting with your peers. It's way beyond that. In this session, we have two major brands of their own category, and they'll be discussing the evolution of social media content, unfolding changes. Mr. Vivek Sharma, CMO Pidilite, and Mr. Harish Narayanan, CMO Myntra, along with Mr. Karthik Nagarajan, Chief Content Officer, Wavemaker India. I would like to invite Mr. Nagarajan to moderate the discussion. Over to you, sir.
Welcome to this session on evolution of social media content, where we talk about the unfolding changes in this medium. And I can't ask for a better panel on this one. I know we all say this before the beginning of any session, but I actually mean it because we have Harish, who's the CMO of Myntra, who can talk to us about this extraordinary confluence of an e-com brand and social media, where they're in many ways dependent on each other. And then we have Vivek, the CMO of Pidilite, a legendary brand which is built on how it is communicated. So would love to hear his views on the platform as well. So two divergent points of view, but a lot of areas of confluence, which is why I'm personally very excited. Gentlemen, how's the different phases of the lockdown been treating you? Vivek, maybe I'll start with you. How are you doing?
Things have improved, Karthik. Initially, in the first few months, things were difficult because everything was shut down. So sites were not happening, consumers were not getting out. But I think July onwards, things have eased out and business has resumed. August and September particularly have been good because we believe that all the pending sites and remaining work has resumed. People have become more confident, and our trade partners and channel partners equally are confident in resuming business. And we see increased positivity and optimism in the trade. In fact, I would say there is more caution amongst people like us sitting at home. And if when you go visit the market and you meet your dealers and contractors and your distributors, they are far more optimistic and positive and enthusiastic to get back to business.
Great to hear that. Harish, how are you doing?
I would echo a lot of what Vivek just spoke about. The good part is, so it was tough for us also in March and April, through mid of May, because fashion, as you know, was not an essential category, right? Which meant that the sales in terms of what we could offer was zero. And then when lockdown eased off, we were the first ones to launch masks. We were the first ones to launch a lot of content. We launched our own social media platform on the app called Studio. So those things brought the traffic back to very respectable levels. And then June was our big end of season sale. So even though the entire industry was thinking about whether or not to launch a sale, we went ahead and launched it. We had a fantastic sale event back then. And that put a lot of confidence, faith in not just our team, but also in our partners. Brand partners saw that e-commerce fashion is here to stay and here to grow, right? And they were very happy to partner even in a bigger scale with us. After that, it has been a very, very strong journey, I would say. So July, August was again a pretty good run, and we finished as of yesterday midnight our big fashion festival. Again, another epic moment. 4 million customers shopped with us over the period last 5 to 6 days. So very encouraging signs. Festive is a huge moment for us, and usually we were a smaller player amongst the other e-commerce players during this time. Our big peak moments used to be June and December, but this time we have a good peak even in October. So overall, very positive signs, and looking forward to the rest of the festive season.
Great to hear that, Harish and Vivek. In sticking to the theme that we have, for the session today, it's been a very fascinating journey for me to sort of just observe what's going on in this platform, right? I think suddenly one fine day, or rather over a period of a week or so, the narratives sort of changed dramatically. We started talking a lot about safety and even mortality, for that matter. Started talking less about politics and something else, at least at the beginning of it. I think now we are slowly moving into the election season in various parts of the world. But in this time, the engagement with between your brands and people on social media engaging with you must have also had a similar transformation, right? Vivek, maybe I'll start with you. Would you want to talk about how this phase has been for you in terms of communicating with your audience on social media?
I think it's a very interesting question you ask. Brands engaging with their audience on social media in these times. when the environment has changed, when the mood is of caution, when the mood is of fear against disease and conservatism. So what should brands do? Should brands continue in their own life as usual mode and connect or not? So I believe that the why and how and when of content and connection with the brands, a connection with the audience of brands has not changed. What has changed for some brands is that what they are saying on social media and on how they are connecting. And let me elaborate on that a bit. Fevicol, for example, our brands like Fevicol and Dr. Fixit have connected better with their audience in these COVID times because we have been very empathetic with our audience in our tone and manner. We have been assuring them and addressing their concerns, whether it's concerns of consumers or contractors or distributors or dealers. And it is this humane, helpful, and positive approach which is helping our brands like Fevicol, Fevikwik, and Dr. Fixit connect better with audience. That's point number one. Second is that I think the messaging has to change in these times to actually address the genuine concerns as well as actually solve the problems of your audience. So I'll give you examples. The elaborate field marketing effort we have from our brands like Fevicol and Dr. Fixit in ensuring site safety were actually supplemented a lot with a fantastic and elaborate content marketing strategy where we were sharing content with our consumers and contractors in video and static forms, educating consumers about the fact that how our brands and our contractors are ensuring site safety so they can get the work done, they can start the work in their homes, and certifying and training contractors on the safe work practices. So our content changed. I'll give you one more example. Now, Fevicol as a brand also released some humorous and humane videos and messages telling people about how to maintain safe distance, how to maintain safety in a very humorous and engaging fashion. In fact, we even played with the two elephants of a logo and added a nice piece of poem written by Piyush Pandey in his own voice. And that was popularly shared by people. So our voice and tone and manner in that second phase of what we call unlockdown was of actually optimism and positivity, which was very much, I think, appreciated by everyone. And third, as we would all observe that the attitudes and behavior of consumers have changed in these times. So Karthik, a lot of people are sitting at home, they don't have access to handyman, plumbers, they're doing their own DIY repairs. So brand like Fevikwik is actually sending content to consumers on social media platforms on how to repair. What are the things they can repair sitting at home using Fevikwik and MC? And we are also sharing a lot of content around art and craft with parents and children in these times, helping them do art and craft at home. So in nutshell, I think brand connect in these times have to change, have to become more human, humorous, reassuring, but at the same time, it has to align with the brand personality and the brand purpose and proposition. If you can have that overlap and match, then I think you will remain very well connected with your audiences.
I've been personally consuming a lot of that content from, from Pidilite, and I just love the way in which you play with colors, you play with design, you play with the two elephants, and sort of remain topical. And like you said, make it light and make it very positive.
Yes.
And at the same time, connect with the users. Right? Harish, for you, it's a slightly different world in social media, right? I think before the lockdown, the cultural relevance of this media to your brand was extremely high. And, we went through a phase where that relevance got completely changed, right? I can't remember the last time. I was presentable, through the entire day in terms of what I'm wearing, right? In such a time, how do you look at this as a platform where the brand can stay relevant, especially because your prime, what you stand for itself, is now not that important?
I would make a slight correction to that, Karthik. So what we stand for is bringing joy and color and fashion and style to everybody, right? That has not changed and that need not change. So building on to what Vivek was saying, see, we had to make a choice, right? How do we talk about Myntra during and post the lockdown. We chose to be the voice of positivity, and we chose to be the voice of helpfulness. And how are we helpful? We shifted the platform from being mainly focused on commerce during lockdown to a content-focused platform in a matter of a couple of weeks. Right? These kind of things happen only at places like Myntra. I don't know how the teams do it, but they managed to completely revisit the homepage, and it became a place where you go and consume content about fitness. We pushed out work from home styling tips. We called it above the waist fashion. We called it. We had tips on yoga and athleisure and what to wear. Loungewear became a big thing. How to take care of yourself. We also have personal care and beauty products on the platform, so that was a strong push. Not only this, I mentioned Studio, right? So Studio was supposed to launch much later. We pulled that into April and launched that, and that became, people are consuming content in multitudes, right? Before compared to what they were doing before. So this treasure trove of customer attention, which they are ready to give to us if we are helpful, and we became helpful in that way. So fitness, work from home tips, just keeping them engaged on what fashion can do to them, even home improvement tips. So Myntra carries a lot of home stuff. So everything from how you want to make your table look better to which clock should you buy, like all of that became very relevant for us. So that was one. The second point I would make is, see, for us, social has always been a big, huge part, or maybe the heart of our content marketing efforts. So for us, it was not a new thing. The tone had to change because people were more thinking about safety. They were thinking more about what does fashion mean in this day and age when we are not stepping out. But the media relevance of social still remains. Right. So this is not to do with COVID. This is more to do with the connectivity explosion in the country, which means that if folks are consuming, YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and, back in the time, TikTok and now ShareChat and whatever, if the customer attention goes there, we will go there. Right. It's that simple. And our customer was, especially because it's fashion, it lends itself to social media. Right. You want to present yourself in a certain way. You want to show off your looks. You want to teach others how they can look better. So fashion and social media go very hand in hand, and that has continued. So our presence on Instagram, our stories being told on YouTube, our moment marketing on Twitter, the regional influence that we have on regional platforms, this is only getting better and better. And you would know a couple of things we launched, right? One was, we work with a lot of influencers for all our marketing campaigns, which means whether it is my end of season sale or the big fashion festival or my brand campaign, we work with a lot of influencers. We recently announced Bhuvan Bam as one of our key brand ambassadors. He's a pure digital boy, right? He's known for being born and raised on YouTube. So imagine him being one of our brand ambassadors. Myntra Fashion Superstar Season 2 is going to launch very soon. You'd have seen the trailers that came out. So social for us is second nature. How we treat it as a media channel is only getting better. The messaging had to be tweaked during the time when lockdown was a big thing, and we were all at home not knowing what will happen next. But even that has come back to normal. So if you see our brand campaign right now, we don't show people in masks. Right? We are not talking about everybody. The context is not about COVID. The context is post-COVID, how are you celebrating life? And there will be that social distancing. It will not be a big crowd. The way we shoot it is very careful and so on. So it is very sensitive to the situation. But at the same time, it focuses on the positivity and the color and the joy, and not so much on the anxiety. So that's our brand purpose. We want to bring back that positivity and joy. And that's how we see our communication and the way we leverage social media.
If I can add to what Karthik is saying, Harish is saying, interestingly, in these times, we have we have seen the change in access and acceptance of social media. For example, we used to conduct a lot of our meets with contractors, plumbers, waterproofers, physically in locations, on the sites, in shops. When the whole shutdown happened, we said we are now have to move online. But while all contractors and carpenters, plumbers, masons, they have smartphones, will they actually move to this medium? And to a pleasant surprise, they not only moved to it, they engaged very well with us on online meets and online sessions. And there was a sense of pride. They were even bringing their family onto their camera to show this is the company speaking and this is the so-and-so senior person from the company. So I think acceptance of the medium has really changed and gone up very pleasantly. And secondly, some people who were earlier not accessed physically to us, some senior architects, etc. In physical world, it's difficult to get meetings with them. When we conducted webinars, we could easily get half an hour from them because easy to get them for half an hour. And I think these two things have changed in terms of brands able to access their audience through social media in these times.
See, in the e-commerce world, actually, this has made us even closer to customers and to brands and to our influencers and celebrities, right? So we launched this thing called Myntra Insider Masterclass. So it's a class where top stylists come and teach, participants, customers, consumers to style better. And that took off in a big way, right? After that, we launched a one-on-one, we call it the Style Squad. So if you are a top like icon customer with Myntra, there'll be a stylist who will talk one-on-one with you and help you based on your fashion choice, help you redesign your wardrobe. These kind of things 6 months ago would have been an experiment, right? Now we can actually call it a proper product. And this is only getting started now. And the difference between going to a shop and buying a piece of clothing and buying it online is reducing. So whatever we can bring to the virtual experience as a tech platform and the leading fashion tech platform in the country, if we bring it, people are very, very happy to adopt it and very happy to experience fashion virtually. And that is very good for us.
In fact, Vivek, what you said, about them bringing their families and all of that, it's such a beautiful moment, isn't it?
It was.
And in a way, I wanted to ask you this: you would have had a certain expectation in terms of how this particular group of your audience, might use this platform, might not be comfortable with this platform, etc. It's safe to say that what actually happened exceeded your expectations.
Yes, and I'll start with the continuation of a theme which Harish has been alluding to in his talks, which is agility. Consumer goods company like ours always look at the e-com companies to say that, look at the pace at which they move, look at the pace at which they pivot. And I always tell my teams, we should have the agility which they demonstrate, the new age companies. But what this time has, this transformation and this pandemic has done to all the marketing team is it has really brought the agility in the teams. Because we all realize that if we don't move fast, if we don't change our messaging fast, if I don't react fast, then we will not be able to cope. So it's a very, very pleasant change I have found in approach to marketing, in social media connect, content creation and everything. And in the same continuation, I'll answer your question to say that this crisis actually has accelerated the whole transformation in organization. It's not only in marketing, it's across the organization. What we were able to do in digitization, as we say, in few months' time is happening in now in weeks' time. Okay. So, for example, in Pidilite, we have formed Act Now teams and Plan Now teams. And in Act Now team, we have small group of 10 digital projects going by young managers but we say you can only take projects which you can finish in 60 to 90 days, nothing long term, no big talk that I will do it in 6 months, 1 year. And it is all happening. It is exciting people, it is galvanizing people. So I think that is a big change, not only in digital marketing, I would say in overall marketing and organizational transformation these times are brought to us.
Beautiful, and that's a wonderful theme that's common to both of you, right? Which is agility. I love what you just said, Vivek, in terms of nothing that is long term. Harish, I've been an insider as a partner of yours to some of these successes. It doesn't really surprise me since I've come to know the agile DNA with which you operate. But especially, I think to me, I go with a line that you had said earlier, right? Which is social media is actually second nature for you, for your brand. It's relevant in your category, but especially how Myntra sort of leverages has just been amazing. And all of these changes, you spoke about studio, you spoke about masterclass, which is a stunning piece of work in terms involving influencers, etc. Right? If you were to start talking about some of the challenges that you had during this phase, especially you beautifully used this lockdown to move from just being a brand on social media to becoming an even better publisher of content, right? What are some of the challenges that you faced in this transition?
Before I answer that, I'll lay out a slightly longer term view on this, right? And that will lead into the challenges that I foresee. I see marketers as few generations, right? And by generations, I don't mean age, I mean in marketing style, right? One generation is more brand to customer. So brand stands for X, and brand will say to the customer, I stand for X. So please remember me, and when you go to the store, you like what you remember, and then you pick up my product. Then there is a generation which I belong to, which is a brand stands for X, but we create that X with the customer. So it's a conversation. We have a conversation on an everyday basis, which is why social media, then I say a certain thing, then I hear feedback, then I change it. I see some things picking up on our channels. We hear trends and conversations about a certain type of fashion. Fashion is all about trend setting, and since we have to be at the heart of it, that is cooking what the brand stands for together with the customer. That is my generation, right? We do it well, and it's working well so far. I think the next generation is where we completely let go of control. What the brand, and there are very, very few brands in the world who have done this really well. They just give guardrails and then they step back. Red Bull is an example, right? They have very strong guardrails on what it stands for, but they are not defining how it comes to life. They just step back. Back in the day, maybe a few decades ago, MTV used to be that brand, right? Where it was complete subculture, counterculture, everything put together. So if a brand can step back and users own it, and there are a lot of brands in the new age D2C type of companies, which are almost like this. So if we are able to make that transition smoothly, then brands amplification of the brand voice is predominantly free, one, and more importantly, very authentic. Right now, it is still Myntra's voice, which is getting amplified by social. In the future, it can be Myntra's voice, but what the customer thinks of Myntra, and then it is their voice which is getting amplified. So they are saying stuff on my behalf, right? And that can happen when a brand is really, really authentic, and we stand for that authenticity over time. So that's a longish answer for where I want to head to as a philosophy, right, or as a brand philosophy. And to get there, the kind of challenges we have is social in this country. Although it is scaled, there is always a question of whether it is the right ROI. How do we understand the difference between raising awareness at scale to moving consideration to how do we compare this to perf marketing, which gives me immediate response and so on. So this dichotomy of, hey, I need sale today, this hour, this 15-minute, this 5-minute window, and I need to do social media and have a brand conversation. And what I spoke about as the longer term, which is I want the customers to feel ownership of the brand and then drive it from there. These are objectives which do not conflict very easily. So that is one big challenge, right? How do I combine the ROI discussion with the brand conversation discussion with the long-term, storytelling angle? The second one is when we go heavy on two-way conversation, quality control is very important, right? Not every piece of content that comes to us is quality content, and we as Myntra stand for a certain level of quality when it comes to fashion. So how do we get the quality content surfacing more often, and how do we reward that quality content more? So that is so quality and maintaining quality is the second challenge. The third one is how to find the right partners and influencers to work with. So our effort on studio, our effort on Myntra Fashion Superstar, these are efforts which are wonderful in terms of setting up the base for the right partners, right influencers, right creators in the future. But it almost has to be like a talent management program where we see them before they become big, we nurture them, and when they are big, they are Myntra's supporters and advocates and loyalists, and not some other platform. So I think these three would be broadly the challenges I would say in working with social ecosystem as a whole.
Good. I love exactly the point you made about losing control, or rather willingly letting go of the control.
It's a very tough one, Karthik.
Very.
How to do it yet, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And it also comes from a very strong place of not being insecure about it, and actually, thriving in the serendipity it brings about, right? With other confluence of what the consumer perceives your brand to be and what the brand stands for. Vivek, that sort of letting go of control might probably be easier, in the world of joy and fashion that Myntra operates in. It will be significantly, more difficult, for a brand like Pidilite, which has had decades of great communication built in a certain way. For you, if you were to talk about challenges, I think one of the things that came to my mind was in terms of understanding the sentiment of the audience at any given point in time. We spoke about how you're topically being extraordinarily relevant in a very warm fashion. But at all points, I'm assuming one of the questions in your mind is also is this matching the sentiment of where the audience is, etc. Right? How do you handle that?
What Harish spoke about, democratization of content and democratization of brands, that now consumers are participating in the conversations, and instead of brand to consumers, it is consumer to consumer. You can't control it. I think there are 2 or 3 things which are very, very important. And I will illustrate that with the example of Fevicol. Nothing illustrates this better than Fevicol, because Fevicol is a brand which is loved by everyone. It stands for the core proposition of unbreakable bonds. And everyone comments on the proposition of unbreakable bond. And people make their own post. Consumers make their own films and they post films. There are so many films made by consumers floating in media, in social media about Fevicol. We can't control it, because people love the brand and they love the idea and the tone and humor. So what do? I think there are 3 things which are essential to do this. First is you have to define the core of the brand very carefully and very, very precisely with your stakeholders internally. So you should say, what is my brand? So Fevicol stands for unbreakable bond. What is my tone of voice? What is my tone of voice going to be? It is going to be human, humorous, and natural. Okay, that's the content we get out. And as Harish rightly said, when people create their own content, you have to reward them at appropriate times for others to see that what is the content which Fevicol as a brand likes. Sometimes we even comment positively on content created by consumers. And that is how they get a hint and they get positive reinforcement as to what is the content for Fevicol. And by and large, you will see that it stays in the right zone. And from that comes the first tenet of this engagement, what is consistency. So you'll see in Fevicol, there's a consistency of messaging and there's a consistency of sticking to the core values of the brand. That is very, very important. And it's very easy for brand teams and your content creators and agencies to lose way because you get excited by topics, you get excited by various seasons and you do it. but brand custodians have to be consistent, and consistency builds a brand in this medium really, really well. Second thing is, as you're rightly saying, now Fevicol is no longer an adhesive brand. It's a brand which stands for bonds, right? So it actually participates in live occasions and comments on various topics which are happening. It's a very topical brand. A Fevicol tweet on Game of Thrones went viral as much as Diwali one, or as much as the when the royal couple left the British household. We made a post on that. It went viral. It was so very topical. Recently, we did something on most eligible bachelors for trending, and we did a post and as went all over the place. So topicality is important, but the brand has to walk the thin line between commenting on every topic and retaining a certain vertical of conversations and retaining a uniqueness of your personality and conversation. That is very, very essential. If brand starts commenting on every topic under the sun, it loses its uniqueness. So there's a fine balance which brand team has to maintain by what I call owning a space in the minds of consumer around. So you may comment on happenings around you, but the angle and the context has to be your brand proposition. That is the second thing. And the third thing is what I call humanizing the what is commonly known in our parlance as ORM, online reputation. So when you respond to your consumers and when they have a conversation with you, you have to make efforts with your team to ensure that your answers actually are reflecting the personality of the brand, are reflecting some emotions. Then they respond to you. So a Fevikwik will have what I call wacky humor in its response, and a Fevicol will have a more rounded, human, warm approach. And that really, the consumer has to feel that he's talking with the brand and not just talking with someone on the other side. What I call emotionless response versus a very emotional response. So I think this is where brands can actually do this. But last thought I leave with you is, this content coming from consumers is fantastic, and nothing better for a marketer is when consumer own your brand and proposition. But therein lies the risk, especially in a country like India, which is often viewed from the lens of languages, religion, political angles. I think, as Harish also rightly pointed, we have to be prudent enough to put the guardrails as to the zones in which the brand would not venture. And that works for the brand, practically speaking. And it goes back to saying that you have to stick to the core of the brand without getting into those zones. So I think that's what makes for an engaging brand, engaging with consumers on an everyday basis, and yet retaining their unique identity.
Reflecting on what you just said, Vivek, so beautifully, we spoke about ORM especially, right? And to me, I see a lot of parallels in what Harish had said earlier. In terms of the way he's looking at influences and the challenges that come along with it. I think the common thread is really you trusting the tonality of the brand, or what it stands for. How should it sound, right? How should it respond in that? In your case, in Fevicol's case, the very unique sense of humor, and in Myntra's case, something completely different, right? Are you, this question is just to both of you, whether it is influencers or whether it is custodians of the brand, who are communicating on the brand's behalf. It's at one end you feel a little insecure about someone else taking it forward. On the other end, it's also empowering that the community is taking your message forward, right? How do you sort of deal with that, or how do you think brands should deal with that? Whoever wants to go first on this.
When posed with open-ended questions like this, I usually go back to the terminology itself, right? We forget what a brand means, right? A brand is a consistent promise over time that we want somebody to remember, that then stays in the minds of the customer, right? So it's about a consistent promise. And in today's day and age, it is also authenticity. If we can authentically say something consistently, that is the most powerful way you can communicate about a brand. Now, layer this on top of your question, Karthik, right? How do we deal with somebody where we want to have consistency and authenticity at the same time? If somebody is authentic, they'll be different each time because each person is authentic and different. But if you have to be consistent, then they have to say the same thing. Then how do we do this? That's the challenge. And I don't, like I said in my previous answer, I don't have a full solution, but I have an idea of what we can do to eventually get there. Is to have a very, very strong brand core. The customer should understand what we stand for first, right? Them expressing themselves will come second. But if they understand what we really stand for, and if they are happy and proud to associate with us, right? For example, a person who buys a Nike shoe will rarely buy something else, Adidas. A person who's used to buying Adidas will not switch to Nike. Like they have a certain brand image that they have associated themselves with, and they will stick with it. So similarly, Android versus Apple, right? So these kind of brand associations. First, let's make sure that the brand core is well established and people understand and associate themselves with that. Then we select a few of them and let them become our partners in storytelling. I.e., in our case, we start with influencers. We have some bit of control. Then next step would be to increase the base of influencers who are talking on our behalf. Then maybe, a few years down the line, we'll crack on how every consumer can speak our language. So that's how I would open it up.
So to add to what Harish is saying, I'll add two things. See, using influencers in social media is a good thing, but I'll use two words to say what brand teams need to do better. And that is where perhaps often I get a sense of complacency or laziness. There is temptation to use influencers, but are they briefed properly about the brand? They're often not briefed properly about the brand. A good brief is essential for you to communicate your message through influencers, using the balance which Harish rightly put between consistency and uniqueness. I won't name brands, but I have often seen on Twitter 5 influencers tweeting the same content line which is taken from the press release. It is pitiable to see that because it's a lost opportunity. And that points to me that the brand team is not making the effort to brief influencers properly. So choose your influencers carefully. Make sure you give them a proper brief and have a conversation with them 1:1 to say, this is what you want to communicate. And the influencer must use their own tonality and personality because that is why they are followers. And we must use that. If we want them to tweet our press release, then why are we paying them money? So that is one. Secondly, I think we must be cautious about the greed to say everything and the greed to be everything to everyone. So yeah. I think a tight brief and a personalized briefing to influencers, an effort there can actually help us utilize influencers far better than what is being done. Harish is pointing toward the future, but I think it's happening in B2B marketing where the content distribution will be automated, linked to the machine learning and AI, where you segment the consumers, the X number of consumers, communities behaving in certain fashion, gets that message. And then you can also use influencers in between as vehicles. But at the end of the day, you can't rule out in good social media influencer marketing the human role of brand custodians in good briefing and keeping a tight leash on the greed.
Beautifully put. In fact, especially the point, Vivek, what you made, and I completely resonate with that, which is it is important for the influencer to talk like himself or herself and yes, like the brand, because at the end of the day, again, if we go back to the basics of it, he has to influence the purchase decision, isn't it? And that can only happen with authenticity. Last question is Harish, mostly to you, which is, you've been in global organizations like Google and P&G, and you would have had exposure to different markets, right? And you're sticking to the topic of influencers. In the case of Myntra and brands like Myntra, I think that fine line between them talking a brand story and the performance of them actually driving conversion and purchase is sort of merging, right? It's sort of blurring rather, right? How do you see India as a market, especially in that space? Do you see it as a very unique market? Because there is a tendency to talk about India in the same lines as markets like China, etc., especially when it comes to influencers. Right? How do you see us as a market in this space?
I'm much more optimistic, and excited about India. The creator ecosystem. So in my previous job at YouTube, I was very, very fortunate to see the creator ecosystem exploding in this country. There was a time, I think it was 7-8 years ago, when we used to have 3 creators in India with more than 1 million subscribers. That number is in 4 digits now. And this is just one platform, right? I'm sure the same is the case with every other platform that you're talking about. So people wanting to express themselves is just beginning. We have given the power, like Vivek was talking about, the democratization of content creation. We are just scratching the surface. And our country is so talented, right? So talented, right? Any form of entertainment or communication you take, whether it's comedy or music or dance or anything, right? We are just getting started. So in terms of creator ecosystem, I think there will be a very, very rich ecosystem across tiers. There'll be your top tier, fantastic creators, then there'll be your up and coming creators. You'll have this entire funnel of creator and ecosystem, which will get only richer and richer. That gives me a lot of hope and excitement, because more diversity in storytelling, more approaches to telling a brand point of view, it makes us that much more. So imagine, instead of working with 10 agencies, you can work with 1 million agencies. That's how I think about it, right? Each of them is an agency in themselves. They are a creator, producer, writer, copywriter, art director, all put in one. So, and even I push my agency partners to work with these guys, right? So it's a creative explosion in a very good way. I only hope that this continues to happen. So for me, India and social and creator ecosystem and fashion, I think it's a very exciting place to tell good stories.
And what Harish is saying becomes all the more important in India with language diversity and cultural diversity. Imagine a content creator giving a brand message in Assam or in Mizoram with their culture, nuances, and language will reach far better and engage better with the audience than what you can create sitting in Delhi or Bombay or Bangalore. You know, and therein lies the what I call the rigor and responsibility of the marketing teams to ensure that the core of the brand doesn't change. And it requires a lot of effort to get it out in such multiplicity of languages and cultural nuances. But yes, that's the opportunity. I love that word, Harish, millions of agencies instead of one. And, you know, user-generated content will remain an opportunity as well as a challenge for marketeers. There's no gainsaying that.
You know, I'm going to try and remain unconcerned about the use of 10 agencies or 1 million agencies, considering I'm the agency on record. But it's been a fascinating discussion. I can't thank you enough. You know, the views both of you put forward, especially on brand and influencers in this medium, has been beautifully complementing each other. Right? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Karthik. Thank you, Harish. It was a wonderful conversation.
Same here, Vivek. Pleasure.
And let's have more of these.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for putting your points together. There is a lot to take away. Keep tweeting using the hashtag Social Media Trends 2021. With this, ladies and gentlemen, we have moved to the last session of the day, and I would like to invite Ms. Neha Markanda, Head of Business Marketing, Facebook, and Mr. Karthik Nagarajan, Chief Content Officer, Wavemaker India, for the exciting fireside chat on the evolution of social media content, navigating engagements using Instagram.
Hi, Neha. How are you doing?
All well, Karthik. Good to see you.
How's the lockdown been treating you?
I think not very different compared to the others. Beginning to get used to this now. In
Right.
fact, I think if things finally open, I don't know if I'd be happy or nervous about making the long drive to work. This has become a bit of a rhythm now.
Exactly my sentiment as well. I'm not ready to make any changes to what I've been doing during the lockdown.
Yeah, but I do miss having people around to work with, of course. I mean,
yeah,
you're staring into the screen all the time. So that's not something that I want to keep on having for long.
that is true. That is true. In fact, yeah, I can accommodate that like once or twice a week.
Yeah, for example, this would be so good to do in person, right? Up on stage, but it is what it is.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. Sticking to the same subject of the lockdown, when we talk about social media today, Instagram is probably the biggest part of it, right? In terms of what is the most exciting platform from a user perspective, whether you're talking influencers, whether you're talking artists, a lot of action, most of the action today has been happening. Yeah. And especially in the last few months, if you see, I think the trend that I was noticing, at least as a marketer, is that all of our regular stars, the film stars, the sports stars, had all obviously gone quiet because their industry wasn't functioning. So the creators took to Instagram, beautifully. How, from your vantage point of view, how do you see the relevance of the platform today and the shift that's been going on for the last few months?
Yeah, I mean, I guess from our perspective, there was a lot that was inherently, happening on the platform. So the fact that there were millions of, people coming to the platform to express their interests, their hobbies, their passions, and to connect also with the people they love. That has always happened on Instagram.
Right.
But you're right. What the lockdown and the current social, distancing has done is to have made the social connect even stronger, and it has accelerated it. So in fact, we saw that people not only opened up far more, as far, just like you mentioned, in terms of the creators and the influencers, but even the consumers, they were getting more and more experimental with how they were consuming content. So within the first few weeks of lockdown itself, we saw a more than 60% increase in Instagram Live, for example. Oh, wow. So it was, I think it happened at both ends, the acceleration and the experimentation of how they were beginning to use the platform. But I'd just like to reiterate that it was only about, using it more and more. Millions have always accepted and come to the platform, to connect with what they love. So whether it's travel, whether it's art, whether it's, photography, many other different passions, that has always happened. But I think this last few months have just seen them express more. So, people are spending more time and getting more experimental with how they're, spending that time on Instagram.
Right. The platform itself, has evolved in the last few years. Right? Like the Instagram of today is very different from the Instagram of, say, 2 years back. So, as a platform, how are you seeing you evolving, with the content that people are creating, especially from a brand's perspective?
Well, that's an interesting question. So I think today the platform has evolved to a point where an entire spectrum of expression is possible for the consumer. So right from on-the-go content consumption via the feed to the ephemeral content. Stories is such a big aspect of everybody's life. So ephemeral content consumption to immersive content consumption through IGTV. Or even a more personalized connect where you want to just direct message. So as you see, there are different types of connect and expression that are possible, and that opens the doors for brands to connect with consumers in all these different ways and in all these different moments of expression. And I just want to say that on Instagram, while I've touched upon a little bit upon the scale, this audience is also a very, very engaged audience. So we had recently done a survey, and nearly 90% of Instagrammers, do take a brand, are interested in brands, and almost all of them take a brand action. So it's a very authentic environment where people have come to the platform for what they love. And if brands find meaningful, authentic ways to connect with them through the different formats of expression that I talk about, then it just takes a whole new different meaning. The other interesting aspect is Reels, which has been one of our recent launches,
Yep.
where creators are now easily far more discoverable. There is a designated way in which you can now find out Reels, and if people start to tap on to working and partnering with creators, and brands take to that as a format, then that opens up a whole set of fresh, new, exciting opportunities as well.
When you're talking audience on your platform, I'm assuming for the most part, even though I hate the word, I think we are referring to the millennials, right? Is that even correct statistically?
Well, that is, that is a popular perception, but I would like to say that today Instagram cuts across all, a wide spectrum of audiences in India. And it is primarily out of the fact that, the multitude of consumers who are coming for a very diverse set of interests and, expression around their interests, all the way from, fashion to technology. So very, very high numbers. So 60% on technology and fashion, music, travel, food and beverage, 53% on food and beverage, and even for inspiration, that in fact, so almost all Instagrammers who are on the platform are there because of people of things that they love, such as this, or to the earlier point that you mentioned of connecting with celebrities. So 69% come to the platform to connect with celebrities. So if you just look at the diversity of both interests and also the reasons why they're coming onto the platform, it goes beyond millennials, so it goes, it cuts across all different cohorts that as a marketer one would be interested in.
Now, I would completely agree to that, right? Within the sense that I'm a podcast host, and if I need to follow someone to follow a culture or a subculture, I would most probably follow them on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe look at some other platform later, because I know that this is where they're going to be most in touch with what they're listening to, what their views are, what they're creating.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you said, like, it's a very, like I said, it's an engaged audience. And then for the other interests that I mentioned, even visually, it is just such a powerful platform that I think that just becomes an even bigger reason why people would take and come to Instagram to connect with the like-minded community members, and show the best that they have as their hobbies.
Yes. And that's an important reason, right? Because today, we associate social media with a whole lot of toxicity.
Yeah.
With everything that is going on around us in multiple countries. But Instagram seems like a breath of fresh air, at least as a user experience, because largely it is very over-indexed on what is visual in nature. Right?
It is,
to an extent, even a little under-indexed on everything else like text. Right?
I always
that really adds to
it does. It does. I think it does, and I always say that Instagram is a very responsible and beautiful platform that's causing a cultural shift in the country. It's really, helping people showcase their creativity in a very, very positive and in a very powerful and in a very beautiful manner. And I think that really makes Instagram therefore such a vibrant and exciting platform.
Speaking to a lot of artists earlier this week, and they sort of reflect what you're saying. Right? I saw in the first few months that many of them were hosting Instagram lives, from cricketers to film directors to everybody else. So they sort of took to that platform fairly easily, right? So that was beautiful to see, and that was also very helpful for many of the fans, at least in the initial part of the lockdown. Then one other segment which has also sort of done a lot of very interesting stuff is brands, right? And I know that some fairly unlikely categories of brands that we work with, as Group M, as Wavemaker, we've been able to do some very interesting stuff on Instagram because it was so accessible to everyone. But before I go on with some examples, what have you seen, which has been great case studies for brands out there in terms of how they've used the platform?
Yeah, in fact, I think it's great that you mentioned that creators took to it. And I just want to highlight what a brilliant opportunity this provides for brands to connect with creators and I just want to dwell a few minutes on what makes the whole creator follower relationship so special in case of Instagram in particular. You see, I think influencer marketing was earlier by and large a buzzword. Typically you would spike a campaign or you just try and create some engagement.
Yeah.
But I think what we have seen is that influencer marketing on Instagram is truly moving the needle on business outcomes. And like I mentioned, almost all Instagrammers who follow brands end up taking a brand action. There is a reason why they do that. And the reason is that the relationship between the creator and the follower on Instagram is extremely authentic and wholehearted. It's not a small connect that you just come, engage with the creator for a few moments or for one video or for one post and you step away. That's not how a creator follower relationship works on Instagram. You follow someone, you follow them over a long period of time. You go through where they travel, what they eat, what they do. It goes beyond just a creator's area of expertise. They truly form a bond and a connect. And because there is just such a deep connect between the creator and the follower, it is also very, very authentic. And that is what I think is a beautiful aspect that brands can leverage. And when brands create that authentic communication via creators, business outcomes are moving very, very strongly. A couple of examples that come to my mind is recently Hyundai Aura used influencers and creators on both Facebook and Instagram to launch Aura. And they saw that for a launch, as we know, awareness is a very, very important aspect. And they saw a 4.6 point lift in awareness. And they also saw a 3.7 point lift in brand preference. And that's, let's say, one kind of business outcome. Another kind of business outcome could well just be engagement. And we saw Cadbury Cocoa do that, during the lockdown period, where they invited creators, shared recipes regularly with their followers during the whole lockdown phase, kept them engaged. And this resulted in a 2.3 points lift in purchase intent for them. So across, this has happened. And the reason that today I can so confidently say that influencer marketing is moving business outcomes is not just because of these examples, but because of the fundamental tools that Instagram has through a product such as branded content. So branded content essentially is creator-led content, but you're not limited to reaching out the audience that the creator alone has. What we can do is via branded content, reach out to a wider audience, the kind of target audience that a brand is interested in reaching out to. And all measurement and testing tools apply to branded content as well. So if you want to make any campaign level optimization changes, those are very much possible. And therefore, if a marketer has the flexibility to take an authentic creator-led message to a large, wide target audience that they care about, not just the ones who are followers, and have the ability to make changes to it, then that's a big win. And that naturally allows for outcomes to be moved. And just in the current context, Karthik, where we all know that production is difficult, production of content is difficult in remote conditions. I think the fact that you can generate authentic content via creators, take them to the audiences, move business outcomes is another added advantage. And therefore, I'd strongly encourage brands to think of this as a massive opportunity waiting to be leveraged.
No, I think I was reminded, when you mentioned production, that we had partnered with Cadbury's and Pocket Aces for the Instagram series first, right? Which I think was one of the first made for Instagram sort of content that we did in the lockdown. Right? I think there's that, and completely agree with you on what brands can do with creators. I think one example that I often quote is what we did with Mother Dairy and Zakir, Zakir Khan, is a very unlikely sort of a protagonist in a Mother Dairy campaign, but because the content that we were talking about, which is how all of us miss our food that our mothers make for us. Right? sort of a thing. I think his poetry in Hindi beautifully resonated. I mean, it was the Instagram first sort of a video that we did, which just became, I think it resonated with a lot of people at that point. So, and I also love some of the examples that you gave, and those shifts in purchase intent are like serious numbers.
Yeah.
Right? So I can see how this is a hugely performance-led piece as well. But how would you, if you have to, the last segment of our conversation, if you have to leave a few thoughts to marketers and brands who are watching this this session, what would you tell them? How should they engage with a platform like Instagram?
I think number one is authenticity. So I think while the formats and the ad formats can keep, varying, and I've spoken about what all is possible from that perspective, but I think authenticity of message is absolutely critical. I think marketers must spend that time to figure out how they can craft their messages in the most authentic way, either by themselves or I think very, very powerfully through creators. Because Instagram as a platform is all about authenticity and true expression. So I'd strongly encourage marketers to think about crafting the right messages for the platform and keeping it extremely authentic. The second part is for marketers to understand that this is a very, very engaged audience, and an audience that is coming to the platform because they are passionate about their interest areas. And that creates enormous opportunities for brands to enter that world very, very authentically. And third, like I said, do not look at influencer marketing as just buzz creation. I think invest behind it as a very, very important marketing, arsenal. I'd go on to say. I think it's a great way to drive sustained business outcomes, and Instagram offers that opportunity. So those are the top 2 or 3 things that I'd like to encourage marketers to think about.
Wonderful, great. Thank you so much. I think that was extremely useful.
Thank you. Thanks, Karthik.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neha and Karthik, for this insightful session. Now it's time to wrap up. And we would like to thank all of you present here for sparing your time and being there with us throughout. I would also like to thank our esteemed speakers for their valuable time and inputs. I hope all of you liked this event as much as we enjoyed putting it all together. Finally, my heartfelt gratitude to our partner, Talkwalker, for helping us make this event a success. Thank you and stay safe.